this was your first IMAX 70mm film, was it not?
It was.
He is the only filmmaker to ever execute a complete adaptation of the Odyssey.
In a certain point, comics need to do what sitcoms do, which is essentially expand the aging timescale.
Elliot Page, I realized why everybody thought that he was Achilles.
It was weird seeing like the little bits of dust on the lens that like were coming through on the projection.
The armor design was awesome. Anyone who complains about it sucks. I'm going to start using my laptop for my notes when I'm not needing it to render things, because I don't know if this bothers you when people are on a podcast and their notes are all on their phone.
I mean,
it just, yeah, that I can get, but just like it feels weird to just be like, yeah, scrolling on my phone.
Well, that's what I'm saying is like a notepad might be your easiest option, because then you can let your computer do things while you still have notes.
Yeah, but that's fair. I just have to I wrote out a lot for this movie at least, so it's just having it on the notepad I used in the theater.
You wrote paragraphs as bullet points.
Yeah, I do that. Yeah, that happens.
Well, you clearly, oh my good lord.
Yeah, I did a lot of prep for this.
All right, well, I guess we better get into it.
Okay.
So the Odyssey on 70mm.
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
The big thing I want to come in with is, obviously, there are lots of elements of this film that are conversant with other stuff Nolan's done, right? There's the, leaving home, promise me you'll come back from Interstellar. There's the Athena pin that's kind of reminiscent of the top, in a sense, from the totem from Inception. There's some of Oppenheimer and the burden of having caused irreparable harm to society. There's a lot of different things you could point to all his different other works. Dunkirk, the stuff inside the horses, like the stuff with Fine Whitehead in the ship.
Mm-hmm.
The big one, though, the one of his films I think this is the most like is The Dark Knight Rises.
Instinctually, I can see where you're coming from,
because it's him at his least slick, and it's coming off of
him as Nolan. You mean?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's coming off of The Dark Knight once had Inception in between, but coming right off the heels of a film that was concerned with doing this sort of civilizational damage through the actions of this person. The Dark Knight ends with this moral compromise that Batman and Gordon have to make, where they're going to lie to the public. They're going to create this deceit that, if exposed and when exposed, will tear Gotham apart. But they do it because they believe it's for the greater good, and they're worried about the harm that will come if they do expose that Harvey Dent was turned evil. In the same way, Oppenheimer, his previous film, is this very bleak story of somebody who, in the final lines of the film, says to Einstein, I think we destroyed the world. I think the stuff that we did in our hope to avoid as much suffering as possible and the millions of casualties that would have come from a land invasion of Japan, we thought we were doing the right thing. And Oppenheimer ultimately thought he was advancing science. He came from a place of he was just a scientist. He didn't set out to necessarily build a bomb when he decided to become America's premier quantum physicist. And then those two films are followed up with the consequences of that. Dark Knight Rises is, once Harvey Dent's betrayal is exposed, once it's shown that Gordon was lying, that is what enables Bane to rip Gotham apart at the seams and proves Joker's point, right? Joker says, these people will eat each other. I'm not a monster, I'm just ahead of the curve. And Bane, without even realizing it, is proving him right, that if you remove just a few load-bearing pieces of the social contract, everything collapses into anarchy. In the same way, Odysseus is really similarly burdened to Oppenheimer, and in this movie, it's this act of deceit of tricking the Trojans into inviting death into their walls. And at the time, that seems like the only solution to this decade-long protracted conflict that's resulted in countless deaths but no actual military progress. But in the end, once that social contract is broken, once Zeus's law is no longer the law of the land, that has tremendous destructive consequences.
Yeah, in ironic twist, the military victory leads to the civil and societal end of the civilization.
Exactly. And I think it's interesting the ways that Nolan pulls from the Aeneid just as much as he does from the Odyssey. As we alluded to in the previous episode, there are different myths that all give us fractions of the Trojan War saga. Mm-hmm. And the Aeneid was a Roman poem by Virgil that follows Aeneas, who was one of the Trojans, he was a demigod, a son of Aphrodite, who escaped with his family from Troy, and has different things that happen to them across the Mediterranean, and it ends up fitting into the tradition of Romans thinking of themselves as being descended from Troy. And that is where we get the bulk of the Trojan horse story, and where Odysseus is perceived as this trickster, this guy that was not morally upright. The Odyssey portrays him much more favorably because it was the Greeks, and it wasn't these people that were trying to portray Troy as the less bad side. Mm-hmm. And there's a few things I could get into that are pulled from there, but one of them just being this idea that the Trojan War wasn't really a just war. The original couching of it in this, we're rescuing the kidnapped Queen of Sparta, was much more of Menelaus being like, some property was taken from me. And Nolan kind of doubles down on that with how he portrays Helen, and Helen ironically feeling more of a prisoner in Sparta in this movie than she probably did in Troy. And then the real reason was, of course, that Agamemnon wanted to wage this war of conquest and have domination over the trade routes. So it's interesting that when setting out to do the Odyssey, he didn't necessarily adapt it just at face value. He brought in this Roman deconstruction of the Odyssey and incorporated a lot from there. Sinon is just in the Aeneid. He's not in the Odyssey. He's portrayed in the Aeneid as being intentionally deceiving the Trojans. The idea that he wasn't in on it, that Odysseus tricked him too, that was Nolan's invention. And he's like, if you look at Sinon's references in like Dante and Shakespeare, when they reference him, it's always as this like falsifier and betrayer, which I think was a good innovation on Nolan's part, because Sinon ends up forming this like moral spine of the movie, that he's sort of the catalyst for Odysseus to realize how much suffering he caused. And another invention of Nolan is his connection with Antinous, which is not present. That it's a way in for Nolan to talk about like the idea of it being brave for them to go off on this war, and this being a marker of courage and of being a man, but then they actually end up just going on this like bloodthirsty kind of rampage, and it doesn't end up being this thing that Antinous imagines it was when he imagines himself as somebody that ideally would have gone, or what Sinon probably was told what was going to be like when he was shipped off to war at a young age. So it's interesting the ways that he, in true Nolan fashion, wanted to play with the Odyssey and not just take it at face value.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the benefit of doing something as an interpretation, because, I mean, realistically, I've seen the argument, and I can't, I don't have the academic rigor of a, resume to be able to back it up, but Homer's version of the Odyssey in and of itself was already an adaptation, because to our understanding, the story had been around much longer than before Homer wrote it down.
Yeah, and there are disputes academically of, like, was Homer real? Was he a blanket they threw over the anonymous author?
Yeah.
Was he multiple people?
And so at the end of the day, like, if we're going to play by history, there probably really is no known original version of the Odyssey. It is all a manner or means of whisper down the lane in some way, shape, or form, ideally with intent. Ideally, the next author or the next translator does something to make it their own.
Yeah, and I really like that Nolan, right off the bat, acknowledges with the fact that he's telling this through the bard, through Travis Scott, who he says he cast because the use of poetry to tell stories is still in vogue today. It's called rap. But opening that,
not gonna lie, I did not realize that was Travis Scott until you just said it.
He also Travis Scott also sings the end credit song, and he had a song that he did originally for Tenet as well. So they know each other. They work together.
Yeah.
But starting it that way, as Nolan acknowledging right off the bat, I am just a link in the chain of retellings of this story. This is not a definitive stand-in for the Odyssey, and I think that's important for people who would have preferred somebody else adapt this material to realize this isn't necessarily the only take on the Odyssey that will ever be available.
It's not the Odyssey. It's Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey.
Exactly. And
which is okay. We can do that.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's a really striking act of humility for him to do that, given that he is the only filmmaker to ever execute a complete adaptation of the Odyssey, and the only American filmmaker to even attempt it.
What about the 54 Ulysses?
That's not really like the full Odyssey.
Okay,
and it's a De Laurenticisization of the Odyssey. Like Dino De Laurentiis, very impressive career of producing films in Hollywood, but he consistently with his War and Peace that he did right after the Odyssey, or after Ulysses, with Dune, David Lynch's Dune that he produced, he treats books as like, all right, I'm gonna like pull a conventional action adventure blockbuster out of this.
Got it.
That was characteristic of like in the 50s when he did Ulysses, kind of the golden age Hollywood. Dune being a very 80s mainstream movie. He's never really interested in pulling doing a authentic adaptation of any of the books. His War and Peace is considered like vastly inferior to the Russian. There's like a quadrilogy that was done in Russia. The director his name escapes me, but it's like this 4-part, like they're all 2+ hour movies, and it does like a real War and Peace. That's considered to be the definitive version of that. So you could argue it counts, but it doesn't. It's not the same. Similar thing that there have been a few different. I looked these up just out of curiosity. There have been like Italian attempts to do it over the years. There's a weird one in the 80s where Franco Piavoli created a fictional Mediterranean language for them all to speak.
Interesting.
And none of it is subtitled.
That's a choice.
Yeah. So I can understand that he's native Italian.
Mm-hmm.
If he were to be like, all right, I'm just going to do this whole thing in Greek because I'm a Mediterranean filmmaker and it's made for a Mediterranean audience. Like, not subtitling that, I think that would be fine. And then they just subtitle it when they do the international home video release.
Making an original fake language that no one knows and then
then
not providing context is a choice of all time.
Exactly. And then there was Ulysses Gaze in 1995, Theo Angelopoulos. Who was a dominant Greek filmmaker, like a seminal Greek filmmaker from 1975 till he was killed in a motorcycle accident in 2012. He was the guy in Greek cinema. But he did it where the Odyssey was set in the Balkan Wars.
Interesting.
And Harvey Keitel is the Odyssey character. And it got second place at Cannes, the Grand Prix, which is the second place prize, and was submitted for Best Foreign Language for the Oscars, but didn't get nominated.
Interesting.
Yeah, not unlike Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, where it's set in Mississippi in like the 30s or whatever. It's just like, what if we take everything else out of this and it's just generally a story about a guy trying to get home to his wife.
Mm-hmm.
There was in 2024, this was actually a pretty good film. It was called The Return. Another Italian director. Italy likes the Odyssey. But it was with Ray Fiennes, and it just adapted books 13 through 24 of the Odyssey, which is the stuff after he shows up on Ithaca again. Mm-hmm. So there's no monsters, there's no gods, there's no mythology. It's just he washes up on shore, and then it's his plot to retake
which is a cool concept, because that was probably my favorite portion of the film to begin with.
Yeah, and you get a full 2 hours out of that movie,
which makes sense.
It's really well done. Ray Fiennes is great. It's the cool action sequences and everything. But it's just that section, and it's detached from all of the mythology stuff. And that's something that I'd be interested in talking about, is the fact that Nolan, almost uncharacteristically, doesn't shy away from the fact that there are fantastical elements here. The Cyclops, the Laestrygonians, Scylla and Charybdis, Athena. He's acknowledging that these things exist.
Yep.
In a way that he hasn't done with stuff like Batman, where he took a lot of the mythic type stuff out of it and went super naturalistic with it.
This is very true. I think that was partially out of a curiosity for himself, but I will remind you of The Prestige, where he has previously been willing to tamper with the ideas of real magic, or at least things that approximate it.
Yeah.
And so it's not entirely out of the realm. I'd be curious as to his perspective as to why so many of his films have been more grounded in scientific reality, and then why only on occasion he will allow himself the mystical.
I think it's because he wants to the things that are out of this world, he wants to convince you that they could really happen.
Yeah.
So this would be interesting to compare to Superman, which we talked about last week, and we're going to do a full episode on, where it's as divorced from reality as possible. Like, it's as comic book, as cartoon, as you could stylize a comic movie. I think so, because it's not really it doesn't really do the, like,
our
detailed
reality, you mean?
Sure.
Because we're definitely still on Earth, and we're definitely still in a world where, like, people get into Twitter arguments in the Superman movie.
Yes, but in terms of how do I put this? It's not as concerned with it embraces the fact that this is a made up equivalent of Earth.
Yes.
Because in comic books, in DC specifically, the main events happen on Earth 1. Our Earth is Earth Prime.
Yes.
Which is and there are stories where the Justice League visits there, and they're like, they meet whoever the DC equivalent of Stan Lee was, and it's like a meta joke or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's in the DNA of, now other DC filmmakers like Nolan himself dispense with that and just say, I'm going to try to fit this into our world.
Yes.
Man of Steel is similar. Superman is like, no, we're just going to do comic book world, and it's going to be nominally like Earth, and there are going to be things like the Twitter hashtag or whatever that are very.
But we're not doing Earth Prime. We are doing its own universe. Yeah.
And so a lot of my experience of that film was none of it really feels like it's happening in a tangible way of what, like, my world is. Like, I can see the made upness of that world.
Mm-hmm.
Nolan doesn't want to show you a made up world. He wants to show you our world and then convince you that this stuff is part of it.
Yes.
That's why The Prestige, like, is so little of that film comparatively is devoted to the fact that they can clone themselves. And that is portrayed as that reality that would change the face of science forever is shown as incidental to the much more grounded conflict of, I'm trying to one up my rival in show business.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Batman. Like, he's showing you a real city that is basically just Chicago in The Dark Knight, and it's basically just Manhattan in The Dark Knight Rises.
Which is funny to me because Batman Begins serves as a bit of a stylistic transition in that regard. Because Batman Begins is probably the most otherworldly.
Well, his thing was he made the crew watch Blade Runner and said, we're doing that. And you can see that come through, that it's the most stylized. But then he very quickly pivots to, I'm just going to shoot it in Chicago. And it's going to have the DNA of Chicago, and then Rises as Manhattan. Because he wants you to feel like you are going about your business in a big city, and then a fairly ordinary bank heist happens, and then fairly ordinary serial killings happen. And this guy who's taken upon himself to dress like a bat goes and does something about it extra judicially.
Which I do think works for the story of The Dark Knight better. I personally prefer Batman Begins in terms of the environment and the stylization of it. But obviously The Dark Knight is the best written story of that trilogy, and it is better served. The Joker existing in our world, in our real world, as a terrorist is far more impactful than as a Prince of Crime clown in an otherworldly Gotham that is exaggerated and doesn't fit.
Jack Nicholson gives a great performance in Batman 1989. He's not nearly as chilling as Heath Ledger.
Because he's intended to be fun and comic booky in a comic booky world. But when you put a battered and psychologically unstable terrorist into essentially real-world Chicago, we suddenly have much greater emotional stakes.
And fewer than 7 years after September 11th, too.
Yeah.
Where that was still something that was, like, fresh on, and
Which is
Nolan was able to play on the fears that people still had about in these big cities, somebody coming in, destabilizing
yes.
the fabric of the world as we know it. So I think with the Odyssey, why he plays the hand more, that he plays a little bit in the Prestige. One that you kind of have to.
I was going to say, yeah,
Hard
the
to do
story
Odyssey
lends itself
without
to it.
We
Yeah.
talked about this last week. Like, it's almost prohibitively hard to do a fully naturalistic, realistic Odyssey.
Or at the very least, it would not be as interesting or enjoyable if you didn't include the fantastical elements.
Right. Like, if you tried to do a prequel to The Return with Ray Fiennes, it would have to be either he does a lot of hallucinations because he's going loopy on his journey,
or it would just be
or
a different story.
It would be a different story. So
it'd be Castaway rather than the Odyssey.
Exactly. But I think he still has some restraint about it in that the way he plays the gods. That we don't see any of them but Athena, whereas in the poem they're all over the place. Poseidon is essentially the antagonist of the
And see, this is the funny part. I know I mentioned this in the car on the way back from the theater, but this is where I disagree with you about Athena.
I actually think you're. Let's get into that in a second when after because I've Poseidon and then one more thing, but because I think you were right about one of your things you said about Athena, but I think it's interesting to talk about the specifics of what exactly Zendaya is doing or playing there.
Yeah, let's try and do spoiler free for the first half, and then we'll jump into spoiler stuff, which I would agree that might.
Okay, so that lends itself well to what I was going to say, which is that in the myth, Poseidon is essentially the antagonist of the story, the primary obstacle to Odysseus getting home. You also have Hermes. Like in the myth, Hermes is the one who goes to Ogygia, which is the island that Calypso's on.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Hey, buddy, you gotta go. You gotta get home." Obviously, Athena is much more overtly present. We see her take forms, and again, let's say that for the spoiler part. But we see her take different forms and then come out of them. Like, we see it's explicit that she is indeed impersonating people or taking different forms. And so Nolan, Zeus appears from the consequences of what Zeus does. Poseidon appears from the consequences of what Poseidon does. But he doesn't have them show up. And he dispenses with, when they talk about the Trojan War, they don't get into what's in the mythology of which gods took which sides. Aphrodite, because her son Aeneas, I mentioned, was there. She's on the Troy side. Athena is on the Greek side. And alluding to any of that at all overtly would humanize the gods too much for this story. That Nolan wants you to feel. I love I don't think this is a spoiler, but there's a line that I love where Odysseus is frustrated at Athena.
Yeah, he says it a couple times.
Why? Yeah. Like, why can't you just speak a language we understand?
Yeah, why can't the gods communicate in a language
and Athena says,
that we understand?
Who doesn't understand thunder? And that is, I think he does a great job of he's doing more supernatural and fantastical than he normally does, but he still has that restraint of, I'm going to still make this feel somewhat real.
Well, yeah, because he in that way he makes the gods gods. He makes the gods other than, like, personifying them in a way in which they look like just larger humans innately demystifies them. Yeah. So leaving them as essentially presences that affect our world that we can't even comprehend in a visual manner, let alone really any other, with minor exceptions in this story, which again we'll get to in a moment, I think does well to keep the power of the gods even greater in our minds.
They're actual deities and not like somebody that calls himself, like, there's something inherently absurd about, at the beginning of Avengers Infinity War, Loki, who's Loki, says to Thanos, "You'll never be a god." It's like, in what way are you a god? Like, you're an extraterrestrial who is very powerful, but you're not a god. You just are stronger than humanity.
Yeah.
And so you label yourself as a god because to them that's what you were back in medieval times when you came and interacted with them. And so that's fine for Marvel because he's a comic book character. But to do that in a mythology adaptation risks undermining the fact that to the people of the day, these were gods. Like, they did think that when thunder clapped, that was Zeus. It's hard to immerse yourself in that if we see him being like Zeus in the sort of way that he's flanderized as, where he's just like screwing everything that moves and being,
which can
capricious
still
and
work.
stuff. It's just a different movie.
Yeah.
And it's like there are films that do like explicitly go into the gods, like the 1981, I believe, Clash of the Titans, which is a Perseus and Medusa adaptation, and you do see the gods there, and it works well because there's like a detachment of, there are the scenes that happen with Perseus and he's going on this journey as a hero, and then we will occasionally cut away to the Pantheon where Zeus is holding court. And you see some of the squabbles and the politics that go on there, but nobody's really interacting, except when I think it's Thetis, who is a nymph. She's not a true god of the Mount Olympus. She is in some of those scenes on Olympus, and then she goes and interacts with her son, who's the villain of the film. And then he interacts, obviously, with the main characters. So there's that linkage to show how the politics of Olympus are affecting our heroes, but it's not so intermingled that they don't feel like they're higher beings. And so you can do that. It just becomes its own movie and takes away from the Odyssey, which is already as stuffed as it is.
Yep.
It really is a breakneck film, despite the fact that it's 3 hours long. And I don't think it is rushed. I think the movie, for the most part, is paced fine. It's just, there's so much is cut out of the myth, which we could get into what all is cut. But to say, oh well, they should have added this other angle with this, that's not really realistic, both for the physical concerns of the IMAX platters and just because the story has a lot going on.
So that's something that I wanted to touch on as well, though, because I remember leaving the theater and thinking, the IMAX situation in terms of being able to watch this in as large of a format as it is, like essentially the side of a building, like the 70 millimeter projection was indefinitely very cool. It was interesting. It was fun. I also, in reflection, counter to my comments in the previous video, where it's more of a marketing gimmick and things like that. It's a little more than that. I recognize that while I was reflecting on the experience of the film. It's like, yeah, it's not really necessary.
Well, this was your first IMAX 70mm film, was it not?
It was. And while I looked at that and say, like, it's not really necessary. You don't really have to do a film like this. Like, that's still true. But I appreciate it for what it is, and what it is an attempt to not just preserve, but expand the means and capacities of analog filmmaking as it stands. And for that, I appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that it is a way in which we can get more people into the theaters more frequently. We can expand our capacity, understanding, and technological capabilities with analog filmmaking, and we can get more people motivated into doing more of that in the future and wanting more of that in the future. So I understand the wide breadth of why we did it, why we're doing it, and the benefits of it. But I will say, as cool as the format is, as interesting and helpful as the format is for the benefits of filmmaking as a whole, especially analog filmmaking, I do think, given the current limitations of the capacity of the projectors for IMAX 70mm, the format hurt the film, because it would have benefited from an extra half hour, which is crazy to say about an almost 3-hour film to begin with. I wish we had the technical capacity to do that. I think it's great that Nolan is pushing this forward, because maybe next time we will. Next time the platters will hold up to 4 hours or something like that. I think that would be great, because I think there's a version of this film that is even better than what it was, with an extra 30 minutes involved. I think there's a lot of great things in there. I think it works as it is, but I do think, and I feel like I remember hearing Nolan say they had to cut a lot and trim a lot and speed up a lot because of the 3-hour limit.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling when they were in the DI, they had a version that was probably like a little over 3.5 hours. And it was probably the version that made the most sense, that we wanted to see the most. that let certain scenes and certain moments breathe like they should have.
Yep.
Not that anything's necessarily missing. It's just that there are moments where I think a little bit of more time to reflect would have helped. Even just like cuts where, like, I remember there's one cut with Tom Holland's character and what is his name? I'm thinking of all of the characters that he's played. The suitor.
Antinous.
Yeah, but what's the actor's name?
Oh, Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson. That's it. There was a scene with them in particular where I remember Pattinson said something, and Holland had a little bit of a reaction, and then it immediately cut to Pattinson walking away.
Mm-hmm.
And like there was a solid extra 10 seconds there that belonged in that scene where there was a look and a reactive look, and then a pause, and then a walk away, that in terms of the beats for the scene, for the digestion for the two characters of everything that was just discussed, and for the audience, and then have him walk away and have that moment. I know for certain, at least in terms of my understanding of filmmaking, that was the way that scene played out in the original edit. But because of the cutting for time, it had to have that slightly jarring cut. And there's points in the movie throughout where you can kind of see where they had to trim out moments, even just a few seconds here and there, to shrink down the length in order to get it onto those platters.
So it sounds like you're not necessarily looking for another half hour of story that would have made it more effective. It's just more like, let it breathe approximately 30 minutes more throughout the whole film.
Oh, yeah. I think each scene, there were moments and beats that had to be trimmed in order to get the runtime to where it needed to be. I'm not necessarily saying I think there were scenes, like full scenes that were deleted. There may have been, and that would have been interesting to see. But I think realistically, like, even just like a 15-second shot of Odysseus looking at the sunset, searching for Ithaca, not being able to find it, knowing he can't get there, just little, and like, I'm totally making that shot up, but I feel like there was probably something like that was shot for the middle of the film. And moments like that where we get to kind of impress our own ideas upon the blank slate of a dialogueless Odysseus, longing for being able to go home. And just in every scene, or almost every scene, I feel like there was a moment that existed that had to be eliminated in order to fit the platters.
Yeah, you're probably right. I think what people who get really bent out of shape about runtime miss, people that are really mad that when movies are long, is that those beats matter. If that's not filler, that's not making you just stare at nothing. That matters for making the story have as much emotional weight as possible and making the parts of the story that are fast-paced more effective. There was some discourse about this when Zack Snyder's Justice League came out at 4 hours, and people are like, why is this 4 hours? Like, this is just him being self-indulgent as a director, and why does the scene with the Flash saving Iris take so long? Why does this scene take so long? It's like, because the movie's breathing, and you're going to see stuff where there's a solid half hour of fighting Steppenwolf in Ukraine or wherever that scene is. That's going to go pretty fast. That's more effective because you've spent time with these characters and the movie's exhaled. And if you were to go through and say, oh, we're going to get this down to 3 hours, because it's probably what would have happened if he hadn't quit the production, is that they wouldn't have let him do a 4-hour movie in 2017. They would have maybe let him get away with a 3-hour movie. That wouldn't have been as effective as what we ended up getting, because that hour there would have been scenes that got cut, but there would have been those moments of breath that help us, like you said. I think you put it perfectly. Letting us project ourselves onto the characters, let us imagine what the characters are thinking. That would have made the film better than the Joss Whedon version, but it still would have been choppy. It still wouldn't have been. And you could.
Well, that was the exact problem that happened with Dawn of Justice.
Yeah, that half hour that was cut for the theatrical release because they were afraid of having a 3-hour movie in theaters, like, that was stuff that mattered.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is in that there actually were plot points and character points that were missing. And
it was both, because you had the whole subplot of Clark Kent being a reporter and investigating the Batman. You also had a deeper understanding as to why Bruce is making the decisions he's making in that film. Yeah, exactly. Like the oft parodied Martha scene in the theatrical version, that's just our moms have the same name. Cool, helps Batman up, and they go to business. In the Ultimate Edition, the Blu-ray, it's so much more. It's so much more of him realizing that he betrayed himself and what he set out to do when he lost his parents, and that his quest that he did in their name has become a crusade driven by anger and by a misguided desire to hurt people.
Yeah, it's no longer that he has the same name, I can identify with this person. It's the self-recognition that this is who he strove to be. He wanted to be this kind of hero, and now he's about to kill that, essentially the old version of himself.
Right, and realizing that Superman actually is in many ways a human too.
Yeah.
He says the line beforehand, I bet your parents told you that you were special, that you were here for a reason, and he's imagining that these are he's talking about Jor-El.
Yeah.
He's talking about like, oh, you were sent to this planet to, in a similar way to what Gunn Superman was, where he was sent there to be a conqueror and whatever. That's what Batman imagines he is. And then when it's like save Martha, it's like, oh, your mom's a human being.
Yes. Well,
your mom isn't an alien. Your mom is somebody that is really here and really in danger.
Yes. And it also, obviously there is that line between the two. It's like, oh, okay, we both, in a way, it's almost like, oh, you're more like a brother to me than I realized. And it's also, I have a moment to redeem myself. I can save the mother that I never could.
I swear to you, Martha will not die tonight.
Yeah,
which
and
like,
it's
I
just,
can never hear without tearing up a little when he says it.
Well, and it's because like you get all of those details, all of those perspectives of his psychology wrapped up into a nice bow in the full film, and you start to understand it's like, oh, this is a huge moment for this character who has been on a negative trajectory for years now, that has just accelerated as the results of this film, and now he gets to have that moment of self-realization, self-actualization, of realizing, oh, I am about to become the thing that I swore to destroy. I need to fix that, and the best way I can do it is redeem myself for the thing I wasn't capable of doing as a child, which is saving the mother figure that I lost. Even if it's not my own actual mother, at the very least, the goal of me wanting to never let this happen to someone else is something I can still do, which is very, very appropriate for the character.
It's incredible. And so I'm never, for that reason exactly, I'm never going to complain about a longer film that tells a more complete, thorough story.
Yeah.
I'll never be mad that I had to strain the capabilities of my bladder to have a more complete and thorough story. I can live through that. Sometimes things do need to be cut. Sometimes that's the right choice. But in general, I'm happy to err on the side of longer. And I'd be curious, because I do think that the next innovation that IMAX will do for Nolan is making bigger platters, figuring out a way to engineer that. And I'm curious, he's released Interstellar, had multiple IMAX re-releases. I wonder if, for the first time in his career, he will choose to release a director's cut once he has bigger platters available.
I'd be shocked if he doesn't. I would be shocked. I would be shocked if he doesn't still have the negatives sitting in a, in controlled environment that have been saved as a version of the cut film, waiting to be printed. That is like 3 hours and 36 minutes long.
Yeah. He has to know that that's the next one. Now that he's cracked the sound issue, he has to know that the next thing he has to crack is the runtime.
Oh, I considering he had to adhere to it for this one, he absolutely knows it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll be curious. The biggest question I have is what's next? What's on the back burner for him that is the next story that he wants to tell that I'm sure he's going to do completely in IMAX.
That's the thing, is that between the last episode where I mentioned past comments of his and now, he has said more things about doing a horror movie.
Interesting.
That seems like now that's been on his mind for some time.
I see. You know what's
I'm very excited.
You know what's so funny to me about him doing a horror movie? That so many directors start by doing horror as a means to get into the business. And he did do the closest film, I think, for horror for him. Take a guess at which one I'm gonna say.
I think you're gonna make the case that Memento is psychological horror.
Nope.
Really?
Nope. I think Insomnia is probably the closest to horror he's ever done.
Really? Okay, tell me more.
So, the the antagonist, which is ironically Robin Williams in that film.
One of his best performances.
100%.
And he plays a frighteningly good pedophile in that movie.
He does. But that's the thing is, like, he has this weird shadowy quality as an antagonist where through the Alaskan mist, like, there are horror elements to Insomnia, especially given Pacino's vulnerable state in that movie. And there are jump scares. There are it's definitely still in the thriller side.
And spoiler, the scene where he accidentally shoots his partner, or did he accidentally shoot his partner, is shot like a horror film where like you could totally see a horror character being chased by something. They shoot into the mist and they shoot one of their allies.
So he's knocked on the door before. There are even elements of Batman Begins, like with the scarecrow gas effects.
Yeah, when it turns Batman's mask into this like gargoyle type
Yes,
thing.
Yeah, like there are horror elements in there. So I'd be really interested. I don't know enough about Nolan and his upbringing and things like that. I have a book of his from like 2015 that I've never read, which I probably should. But he's definitely clearly been flirting with the idea of horror for a while. Yeah. I do think it's interesting. I wonder if, given the success of Sinners, if Coogler is going to also try and do a full IMAX movie.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think I think it's going to become pretty common now that it's doable.
The biggest thing is I hope they get more theaters with the capacity to show 70 mil, because it was interesting. It clearly had been a while since I had seen film, like actual film being projected in a theater, as opposed to a digital projection, even a digital IMAX projection. Because it was funny because like in the theater, like KOP, you did a great job, but like it was weird seeing like the little bits of dust on the lens that like were coming through on the projection. And like I think the print that they have has like, I don't know what exactly happened to it, but there's one scene with like some, you know, white speckles on it that look like it may have been like slightly damaged. And it's like a little early in the run for that to happen, but that could have just been in transportation. It could have been whatever. But like, it's interesting because it creates that division that digital doesn't have, where it's a clear separation between the real world and the filmed world, like film grain. But obviously in that big of a format, you're going to have like almost no grain. But it is interesting. It's an interesting experience. I do want to, in terms of wrapping up the conversation about the format itself, before we hop into any spoiler type things, what did you think about the fight choreography throughout the film?
I think it was good. I liked it. I think that there were parts of it that I think in general it's a very well edited film. I have things I want to talk about with the editing specifically. I think the editing is weakest in some of the fight scenes. I also just think that about a lot of blockbuster fight scenes in general. I don't think a lot of directors do them super well. Mm-hmm. I think that fight scenes, they do this beautiful choreography, and then they like do all these like quick cuts and chop it all up. And I've seen very few that I think are really impressive in the way that they shoot fighting. Mm-hmm. I think the choreography though in this film was really good. I think that Nolan rebuts a few common criticisms of himself in this film. And one of them is that, he can't do action because the fight scenes in the Dark Knight trilogy are not that great. And I think that he upped his game substantially for this.
He definitely did. The only thing that surprised me, and I'm not going to necessarily call it a bad thing because I understand it's a style, but I think I spoiled myself a little bit before watching this film by watching the original Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy earlier that weekend.
Okay.
Because I went from watching some of the most impressive wide choreography of fights I think ever done. Mm-hmm. The main fight between Sparrow, Turner, and Norrington in Dead Man's Chest
it's so good.
Might be one of the best choreographed fight scenes of all time.
I wouldn't disagree at all.
So I think I spoiled myself a little bit because I went from that, which is we're occasionally in close-up, but it's usually medium and wide shots where you are seeing every bit of choreography possible. Now, granted, it's a little bit fantastical. It's not like as overtly aggressive where like every shot you could imagine or every swing you imagine could be the deadliest like swing. It could be the one. It's definitely more swashbuckling and fun. But at the same time, you're doing all of that action on massive set pieces. One of them being a giant wheel that you've got 3 characters moving on top of, inside of, and around for a solid 5 minutes of the fight. Very impressive. Very impressive.
And the fact they maintain the technique while doing all that is
exactly.
The actors do a great job.
Yes, and I'm imagining plenty of stunt people in that as well. But like, so visually stunning for action, along with a number of other things in that whole series. To go from that to then what I'm going to call the green grass style of filming and doing action, which is only fitting given that it's Damon in the lead role. But like, when we got to the action, I was like, oh, we're doing the Jason Bourne thing. And I was surprised by that, partially because I had primed myself with that swashbuckling fun, but at the same time, it was also like, that's right. Not only did that come out at a different time, it was also a different genre, but we're doing it slightly different in this film for, I think, both a stylistic and a grittiness reason.
Yeah.
But the reason I was surprised is specifically because of the IMAX format.
Okay.
I was surprised that we didn't have a more grandiose version of that fight than we did. And when I say grandiose, I mean a lot of it was right on Odysseus. And I think that's valid. I think it makes sense because you want to be on your main character in the action. And part of the benefit of doing that is you put the audience in the middle of the action. Swords come out from either side and things like that. So they're as much of a participant as Odysseus is. In
That's how Game of Thrones, a lot of the battle scenes go as well for that.
Yes, yes. However, I find it interesting because as much as we are trying to identify with Odysseus within this story, one of the elements of that final fight is that no man can match Odysseus. Mm-hmm. The whole reason he was able to start and complete the fight was because he was able to string the bow that no other man could string. And I think it would be viable in that moment to step back as the camera and as the audience and watch Odysseus be Odysseus.
I really that's one of the ones I'm talking about that I think was not as good. I really wanted that to be the Batman warehouse scene.
Yes, agreed. The one from Dawn of Justice.
Yes, I wanted just to enjoy the wish fulfillment of Matt Damon with just beautiful, minimally cut choreography. Just going nuts.
Now, understandably, that's a lot more work in terms of choreography.
It is, and
but I could see that scene even still in the IMAX format, where we're V for Vendetta. Yeah, I'm imagining a V for Vendetta kind of final fight with Odysseus.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I think the stylistic pivot would have been good there, though, because a counter comp I could give is it's good that the fight scenes in this weren't 300. 300 is a graphic novel.
Yep.
Snyder's very concerned with getting those iconic images from the panels and having fight scenes that are magnificent, and you see Gerard Butler and his abs in slow-mo as he's killing some dude or whatever. Like, that's the intent of that.
Yes.
And that would have been at cross purposes with the intensity of what these fight scenes that are supposed to be frightening for the audience. Like, we're supposed to go, like, any one of the, like you said, any one of these blows could be the death blow for Odysseus or any of his men. But then to, at this point, that's just him and isn't really a battle scene so much as it is like a massacre scene, pivoting to a more majestic and less quick cutty and shaky cammy style.
Yeah, because that's the thing. With an IMAX camera, I was not expecting shaky cam. Yeah. And that's why, like, the green grass thing surprised me, because not only was I primed with a totally different genre of film, but I'm looking at an IMAX projection, and I'm like, this is a massive, heavy camera. I would imagine that we're probably going to lock off a lot, or at least do dollies and cranes and things like that. But then we had, like, what felt like a green grass shaky cam at the end, and I was like, first of all, I'm impressed you got this with an IMAX camera. Like, how many people do you have crouched with this blimp on top of them.
Yeah.
This is it's impressive. But at the same time, I'm imagining a like top-down shot, like a Fincher-esque top-down shot.
Yeah.
That is, it starts right over Odysseus, and you're slowly pulling away to reveal the circle of people like around him, and him like frantically going back and forth between people, and individuals slowly dropping as he fires off his arrow and hits them with a sword and stuff like that. Like that, I was expecting that kind of a final fight.
Did you watch John Wick 4?
I haven't yet.
There's a shot that's top down, following from room to room in the building, and so like it's almost like you're watching like an isometric action in a video game, but it's just showing you see a guy from like 2 rooms away that is gonna come get him, and you see John Wick deal with his 2 guys, and then as the guy comes around the corner, you see John Wick fluidly.
Yeah. So
stuff like that would have been really.
So part of the reason I'm imagining it's a perfect circle around Odysseus as he's just like dropping flies essentially is because as people circle him and as the bodies drop, he is actively forming an O around himself.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
And I like the fun of that. I like,
that's great.
And I think that's a little too stylized for what the film was, but just as a wish fulfillment thing, that would have been really cool to see, especially on IMAX.
It wouldn't have been too out there for Nolan though, because he has that shot in The Dark Knight Rises where the funeral shows the Joker's smile.
Yeah.
Like he's done similar stuff, so that wouldn't have been completely out there for him to do. I'm curious on the topic of the IMAX camera having to do different shots with an IMAX camera than you usually do. Did you notice anything about the focus that was weird at any point?
I did notice the one scene that I focused on the focus was early in the film where Damon and Hathaway are in bed together.
Okay.
And they're having the conversation. And we're pulling focus back and forth between 2 people whose faces are as close as they are to each other, as they are. I guess they were shooting wide open to be able to use natural lighting or semi-natural lighting. But in my mind, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, why wouldn't you stop down and shoot this in a way where both characters' faces can be in focus at the same time? Because I find it more interesting. The more I go back and watch some of the films that really influenced me early on in wanting to be a filmmaker, I go back to Spielberg frequently because Spielberg was the first Jaws was the first real movie I ever watched, and it's the movie that made me want to become a filmmaker. And in Jaws, along with a lot of other Spielbergian films, both in terms of Spielberg himself and other people who followed suit, is he closes down a lot. Like, he shoots maybe like F8 or F11, even with a lot of lighting. And I understand we are now in a world that does things differently, but the benefit of that, especially when you've got multiple people on screen, is you enhance what I call rewatchability. And the reason for that is because if you've got more than a person on screen in focus, you can't look at both of their faces at the same time, which requires you to choose. But part of that choice means the next time you watch that film, you're going to make a slightly different choice, and you're going to see a slightly different choice that one of the actors made.
Such a good point.
And so the fun of that is then rewatch it. Like, I can watch Jaws over and over and over again because no matter how much I watch it, my eyes are never going to go to the same place every time. And so I will pick up on something that Dreyfuss did on the 52nd time I watch it that I didn't see the previous 51 times I watched it. Every time I watch the film, I discover something new. And that's similar with all of his films that he shot like that. The Indiana Jones films, like anything like that. So again, the more time goes on, the more I'm not upset by the fact that I'm disappointed by the fact, though I understand it and I have done it as well in some of the minute things I've done, the idea of racking focus on the characters that are most important in the scene. I understand it, there is value to it, but I think it's a lot more interesting and a lot more inclusive to the audience to stop down, leave it open, and let them choose where their eye's going to go.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There's definitely a time and a place. The reason why I ask is there were a couple of scenes with Telemachus and the suitors where I think they missed racks. Most of them are subtle enough that you probably wouldn't catch them. One of them was like, there was one shot that was, I thought, just like completely egregious where neither he nor Pattinson are in focus for the whole shot.
I was wondering, there were a couple things I noticed about that. I thought it might have just been something with the print.
It could have been. That's why I'm curious to see the film again in some way, because I want to check and see if that was just me or if that was we were watching it at kind of a weird angle.
No, there were definitely shots where it looked like in my head, I'm like, was that 35 millimeter stitched into an IMAX?
I see what you mean.
Which
yeah.
I doubt it was, considering the whole thing was shot, IMAX. But there were moments definitely where it was like extra grainy or extra fuzzy, and I was like, did something happen to the print there? Like, what's going on?
That may well have happened. And I do like occasionally when there's characters like are in and out of focus in a shot. Like, I think there can be good uses for that.
Oh, there's definitely times and places where it's relevant.
Not to continue making this a stealth Zack Snyder episode, but at the end of Justice League, when the Joker is...
or in the thumbnail, are you going to have Zack just like in the corner here?
Yeah, I am definitely going to do that. But with the Joker, he does this, where the Joker's kind of like, as Jared Leto leans back and forth, he's in and out. And it fits the fact that
it fits that
scene
vibe,
is a dream. It's supposed to be surreal.
Yep.
It's supposed to... He's supposed to be a very unsettling character. That I think is a good, restrained use of that. But these were shots that didn't look intentional. It looked like the focus puller missed their mark and no one caught it, which is shocking for Nolan because he's very on point with continuity. So it is possible this was just something about the print got effed up or something like that.
Quite possible. I also do want to just make a very quick point, is that despite a lot of the people kind of freaking out about different castings in this movie, I loved the cast.
Oh, we need to talk about this. Yes.
Yeah, I thought the casting for this film was phenomenal. I think my favorite casting choice might be Tom Holland.
Couldn't agree more.
I think Damon as Odysseus was wonderful. I think there were a lot of other characters that were great. I think this might be one of the best performances of his career, and I think it was one of the best casting choices.
Yeah, right before we recorded, I was reading Matt Neglia at Next Best Pictures review, and he made a really good point that this is kind of a metacast because this is the point at which Tom Holland is nearing done with Spider-Man.
Yep.
The Secret Wars storyline that they're approaching with Avengers right now is a natural off-ramp for Peter Parker, as it shows many Spider-Men working together. That is clearly something that they've been approaching with multiverse and with other things.
Well, also at this point in his career, I fully understand him wanting to move on for the character.
100%. And I don't think Disney... It may be a different story if they ended their partnership with Sony on this franchise, but I don't see Disney ever doing the grown-up Peter Parker storylines from the comics. I don't see this Peter Parker. It's not that even this Peter Parker. I don't see Marvel consciously choosing to advance his character to the point where he's going to marry MJ and he's going to have that part of Peter Parker's life that he ends up getting.
I think the only way they would do that, being realistic in terms of the way careers go, I could see them doing that in 15 or 20 years after Tom has stepped away.
Yeah.
And then having him come back for a film, kind of like what they did with Tobey Maguire.
Yeah, I could totally see that. It's just... I want to talk about this a lot in the DC episode, which is coming up. But there's a thing that bleeds into the writing creatively that is a totally pragmatic concern with comic book characters, and that is... You need to keep people reading issues every month for decades. You need the characters to kind of come back to equilibrium most of the time. And there are ways to do that while still growing the characters up. What DC's done with Batman and giving the Batman family, and he has different Robins who have their own different stories. That's been a really good execution of that. But
in a certain point, comics need to do what sitcoms do, which is essentially... shrink the aging time scale. Or expand the aging time scale.
100%. And so with Spider-Man specifically, that's led to some really stupid editorial choices. But...
Or you always just, you have a reset.
Right. You need to do some version of that to sell issues.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that with movies, but when the movie rights are owned by the same corporation that own the publishing company...
Yep.
You have... philosophical bleed-in of methods.
Yeah, and we're at a decade of Tom as the character?
Yes. Yeah, he was introduced in Civil War 10 years ago, exactly. So and this is him. So it's a natural off-ramp for him with Spider-Man for a couple reasons. He has kept talking about how much he's learned about filmmaking from the process of working with an auteur director for kind of the first time.
Yeah.
He's in talks to be in Thomas Vinterberg's next film. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
I'm not, no.
I believe he's Swedish. He's
Okay.
from Europe. And he did Another Round, the movie where Mads Mikkelsen is an alcoholic. It was a pandemic movie that was really good.
Okay, interesting.
Won the Oscar for Best International. But he's also just known for doing European art films. He was a collaborator with Lars von Trier for some time. And so he's in talks to do that, which is so out of wheelhouse for him, even more than the Odyssey is. So his choice of project is maturing. What he's challenging himself to do as an actor is maturing, which is exactly the story of Telemachus. That he is going from somebody who, with youthful rambunctiousness, wants the idea of being king, to somebody who actually has to grapple with things like how to handle this kind of invasion of his household.
Yeah.
How to deal with the responsibility of taking a life for the first time.
Yeah, it goes from the idealization of a dream to the reality of the responsibility of the title.
Absolutely. And I think that was an incredible arc. The way that Nolan just did the Telemachus story was so well executed. Tom Holland did such a good job, and it feels like a really exciting turning point for him, because he's been a good actor the whole time. He was in The Devil All the Time some time ago, where it wasn't a very big, well-marketed movie, but he's phenomenal in it. He's got points in the Spider-Man movies where he is given a rare opportunity to show his chops, and he does. It's just now that he's sort of seen what's out there and broadened his horizons, it's an exciting parallel arc. Other casting stuff, we'll get the two big ones out of the way. Lupita Nyong'o, she did fine. She wasn't given a whole lot to work with, which is what I expected, given that it's the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Helen's not really in it.
Yeah.
The Clytemnestra Agamemnon story is largely from the stories of Orestes, which is their son that avenges him. But she did great in the brief scene of her killing him, which I knew she would.
I thought Pattinson did a good job in his role.
Pattinson did a really good job. The last thing I want to say about Helen, though, is that I was sort of underwhelmed by her just sitting at the table, kind of snarking at Menelaus, where what really sold me that, this is why Nolan cast you, is the last line that she says, where she's like, "Tell your mother I'm so sorry for all the pain I've caused, or for all the suffering in my name." And I don't think I've ever seen it portrayed in an adaptation, her feeling all this guilt. Years and years of death and carnage were caused because in this adaptation she voluntarily went. She's portrayed as a prisoner in Sparta, not the other way around. And so to show that, like, her having to live with everything that happened because of her, in a sense, such a good choice, and it just like really hit me the way that Lupita Nyong'o delivered.
It was really solid.
The other one, obviously, Elliot Page. I realized why everybody thought that he was Achilles. And it's because in the scene where he goes to the edge of the ocean and speaks to the dead, he speaks to Agamemnon, he speaks to Tiresias. The third person he speaks to is Achilles in the poem. There obviously was not really a reason for Achilles to be in this movie, just because that's just wouldn't have really added anything. But so some PA or somebody on set must have leaked that Elliot Page was in that scene, and because they knew Benny Safdie was Agamemnon already, they were like, "Oh, he's Achilles."
That
whatever.
makes sense.
I thought he did great. Sinan was one of my favorite parts of the film. Just I talked about it a little bit already, but just being the catalyst for all of the realizations Odysseus is having about the ways in which he's screwed up was so good. And the scene when he comes out of the dirt and is talking of it, and telling him to, go to Antinous and give him back his shame. That was just incredible. I totally see why Nolan brought him into this, and it was just such a just crushing story that's not even in the Odyssey. Like, this was purely Nolan coming up.
Oh, really?
With
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, he's not in the Odyssey. He's in the he's mentioned in the Aeneid as an intentional part of the plot.
Mm.
And so Nolan came up with this idea to have him be in the Odyssey as somebody that Odysseus tricks into helping complete the scheme.
Yeah.
And that was an incredible rabbit to pull out of the hat.
Yeah, agreed. It also enhances the guilt that Odysseus feels about everything.
Yeah.
Which I think is solid. So yeah, it's really awesome. Plus the so is the whole straw, like the drawn straws thing, is that original?
I believe
as well?
that is a Nolan invention.
Okay. Which
Someone
again,
in the comic comments can go ahead and cite where it is in the myths if it is, but I believe that is because the whole thing of him having this connection to Antinous is Nolan's invention. So I assume that the idea of it being a lottery, there may have been the idea that it was a lottery that I could see being in the actual story, but Sinan's specifically role in that is totally Nolan.
yeah, and I really like that. I thought it was a really cool addition. Now knowing that it was an addition, at the very least, it was a very interesting and a dynamic part of the story because it really makes Pattinson's character that much worse.
Yeah, and I love that it would have been so easy to just have him be a stock character of a slimy, creepy dude.
Yeah.
That is trying to steal
No,
another
it's
man's
even
woman.
better that he's just a malicious person.
He is, but we see his motives in a more dimensional way than we needed to for him to serve his purpose as just the random, just creepy dude.
Yep.
This idea that he made the choice to switch lots, but he's so insecure about it that he needs to make his whole personality. It's like those people, if you've ever interacted with people that thought about going into the military but didn't.
Yep.
And they make it their whole personality, like, man, I would have done great in the army.
Yeah.
And then they just bring that up constantly.
Yeah.
And
Like,
it's like, okay, well, if you could have done it, so if you didn't do it, shut up.
yeah. Why are we talking about?
Why are we? And it's just such a specific set of motivations down to Pattinson even always wearing armor, even though none of the other suitors are wearing armor.
Yeah.
That made him just a little more fleshed out in a way that adds something very subtle and well done to his character. Another performance I want to call out, Samantha Morton, Cersei. She's getting some of the most acclaim of the performances in the movie. The way that Nolan did the whole Cersei thing was really good. He took some liberties there that were all correct choices, I think. The visual effects of the pig stuff was really good.
Yeah, that was
Cersei.
insane. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that when we get into the spoilers in the next, once we wrap this up.
Yeah, Cersei, but just Cersei having saying these things about oh, put your disguises back on when she turns them back. Her line about how it's pigs because they're battle hungry is so fascinating because when we think about battle hungry, if we were to assign an animal to that, it'd be some kind of predator.
Yeah.
It'd be wolves, it'd be lions, it'd be falcons, right? And it's like, no, the best animal to represent people that want to draw as much blood as possible is the pig. It's so good. The thing with her sister is hilarious. I like her better as a bird. She's really good. There are people who comparing her to Heath in The Dark Knight. I don't know that I'd go that far because I don't want recency bias to bleed into what I'm saying, but she stole the show. And other than Elliot Page and Tom Holland, probably my favorite performance in the film. And there was something. One of the crew members completely random detail. One of the people she transforms and does the clay shit with is Sean Avery, a former New York Ranger.
Interesting.
His first career was as a hockey player, where he was known primarily for just nonstop shit talk and unsportsmanlike conduct. He got suspended from one of the teams he was on because he was coming into the rink for the arena for the game, walked right up to the reporters and started talking shit about two other NHL players that are dating his exes.
Interesting.
And the league disciplined him, the team disciplined him. He would just do that unprompted. He would just start taking shots at people. He created a rule that's now called the Avery rule in the NHL, where he would go up to Martin Brodeur to screen him during a game against the Devils, And normally when you're screening the goalie, you face the play, but he would go up and face Brodeur and do this. And so the NHL had to clarify their unsportsmanlike conduct rules to incorporate that counts as unsportsmanlike conduct.
Wow, that's nuts.
But this is his third Nolan film. Like, he completely pivoted. He pivoted first into like fashion design, and then he started acting.
That's so odd.
Such a the cool people that are just very small roles. Giovanna Depo, the trombonist from Babylon, is one of the crew members too. Like, everybody's kind of somebody in this.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who the crew member is that I'm thinking of that I really liked.
That's the cool. Some people don't like that Nolan has these huge celebrity casts now, and I somewhat understand where they're coming from. But a cool side effect of the fact that he does that is that if all of his main roles are A-listers, his B and C roles can also be really cool people.
I think it's Himesh Patel.
The second in command, Eurolocus?
Yeah, loved him.
He was great.
Absolutely loved him. Awesome. Yeah, with that, do we want to talk about some spoiler-ish things for the last, 20, 30 minutes? Awesome.
Definitely.
So the first thing I want to come back to is the Athena bit. Also, yeah, guys, spoilers, obviously. Spoilers if you don't want to hear certain things. I mean, obviously the story's pretty old, but
I do want to get into some of his changes too. So this is spoilers for the movie in so much as it is spoilers for the poem.
So the Athena thing.
Let's get into that.
My interpretation of Athena's existence in the film was, through the entire film, I kept thinking, Zendaya's a great actor. She's an interesting choice for Athena. For no other reason than that's not the characterization I would have expected. I would have expected someone who is physically larger and more imposing and older. Not in any direction beyond that. It's just, when I think of Athena, I think of strong, stoic, and a bit on the older side in terms of the wisdom.
I think somebody like 35.
Minimum, maybe even 40. Like, someone who's clearly and tall, built. There's a reason why she's the goddess of wisdom and war and things like that. Like, that's, obviously there's more to her. Yeah. But when I think of an embodiment of that as a woman, it's those things. And I like that embodiment. It's kind of my type. I'm not gonna lie. But so when I'm seeing Zendaya on screen, I'm like, I appreciate her as an actor. It's an interesting casting choice to me. That's not what I would have expected. I wouldn't have expected somebody who is on the shorter side, is very lean, and she has the commanding presence, but again, that young.
Yeah. For my part, I'll hand it back to you in a second, but when I heard about that casting, because she and Telemachus have so much time together in the poem, I was like, is Nolan going for an Eyes Wide Shut sort of, let's lean into the fact that these people are partners in real life to add some interesting connotations to their dynamic in the film?
Yeah.
Obviously, Kubrick went way out of pocket with that, and I'm sure was not entirely unresponsible for the failure of their marriage. But I was kind of thinking that that's where Nolan went with it. I was surprised to see in the film that they share no scenes together.
Yeah.
So that was so much like you. It was a curveball for me too to see the way that they went with Zendaya.
Yeah, but the end of the film reveals the answer, and as a result of the ending of the film, I love the choice, and it's because at the end of the film, we see that the person we have seen as representing Athena throughout the entire film is actually, at least in my perception, a woman who was murdered directly in front of Odysseus, in front of a statue of Athena, that was also desecrated at the same time as the murder.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that would represent to me that this is Athena taking the embodiment of that destruction of innocence, that destruction of purity, or even just that destruction of, I guess, the mindset that existed before, the laws of Zeus kind of thing, and then using that visage as a means to appear to Odysseus, as kind of a layered thing, because instead of appearing as something that may represent her more in human form, at least our understanding of what Athena is. it's representing someone that is immediately tied to the guilt Odysseus feels. So instead of seeing maybe an objective form of Athena, it's a subjective form that hurts him every time, and it's a reminder of what he's done.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when I was sitting there watching that scene, my first instinct was that this was another vision. That as Odysseus is seeing the statue get destroyed, he's simultaneously having another one of his visions of Athena that is just physicalizing the thing that is symbolically happening up over here.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the car ride back, you said, "Oh, well, I think this was just a civilian, basically, and this was just some random person that got killed." And so he imagined it, and then so that was who he was seeing the whole time. But I think you're right in what you just said now, though, that I think that it is Athena. It is Athena for the whole film. I don't think it's a figment of Odysseus' imagination. But given that, according to the Wikipedia page for the film, that is a priestess of Athena, which makes sense given that it's outside the temple.
Yep.
So whether that priestess was also Athena inhabiting someone, much as it's implied she is. Well, it's explicit in the book. It's implied in the movie that Athena is mentor, Telemachus' aide. You could interpret that priestess is literally Athena, and they're decapitating the body that she's inhabiting.
I would argue, for me, she's not Athena when she's decapitated.
No, yes. Somebody could interpret it that way. I don't think so. I think that is literally a priestess, but because it is a priestess of Athena, that's what Odysseus associates with her.
Yeah.
And so when Athena chooses to, because Athena's trying to nudge him towards the guilt that he should be feeling. And so I think she's choosing to appear as this person to catalyze him emotionally. And yeah, I think it's really effective.
Oh, agreed. Yeah, no, I think it's incredibly effective.
And it is fitting, given the way he portrays the other gods, that we never actually see the true Athena.
Yes.
We see her through, if you take the Telemachus telling certain people you have wise eyes to be a signal that it's Athena, then the first beggar we see at the beginning is Athena, mentor is Athena, and the priestess is Athena. Or the vision of the priestess is Athena. So it's something that is very much something that happens explicitly in the poem, and Nolan isn't going to go that far with I think an appropriate level of restraint there, but it's cool to see the through line of that Athena's still tipping the dominoes over, even though we don't actually see her doing that.
Yes. No, I agree with that. And I also have a thought expanding upon that, which is, given Odysseus' guilt, what do we think about the commentary that this movie is making through the journey that Odysseus goes on? The modern commentary about a declining civilization.
Yeah.
And the potential future of it.
It's a big departure. The ending of the poem is that so Odysseus kills all the suitors. Telemachus hangs all of the women that were sexually entertaining the suitors, which probably good that Nolan cut that. You could have had some sort of he gets the kill on Melantho, Mia Goth's character. That's the servant that betrays them. Not really helpful to Telemachus's arc as a young hero.
Is that in the who's the translation that he based this story off of?
Emily Wilson.
Yeah, is that in her translation?
It is. There's discrepancy in the translations of these women were, I think, conventionally understood to be people that willingly gave what treason law in America might call aid and comfort to the suitors. Emily Wilson took the approach that these were innocent women who the suitors forced themselves upon, and Telemachus killing them was more of a this is soiled property.
Which I can understand why.
I can understand why. I have not really read into. I've done some reading on the different translations as prep for this, because I know hers was controversial, but I didn't know why, so I read up on. I don't know that she necessarily. I think that may have been a liberty she took with translating it. I think it is true that whenever you kind of have like a servant relationship, consent doesn't have the same implications that it does with equals.
Yeah, not quite.
So I think that she isn't necessarily wrong. I don't think it's incorrect of her to take a hard line on that. I would question whether that's something that's actually in the language of the Greek or if that's something that she, using modern sensibilities, drew from it.
Yep.
I'm not an ancient Greek scholar. I will leave that an open-ended question. But yeah, you could have done some version of that where he gets the kill on Melantho. I don't think it would have added anything. I think it's much more impactful for him to kill the one dude that's furnishing weapons to Antinous. But anyway, so then that happens, and then Penelope's final test to Odysseus is, can you move our bed? And Odysseus replies, I can't move it. No one can because I carved it out of an olive tree. And that's the final thing of Penelope knowing that it's him. Again, probably good that they cut it. It's way cooler for her to recognize the bow strum anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
The bow strum is one of my favorite parts of the film.
Yeah, it's so good.
The fact that the first time we see Odysseus' face is when he does it.
Yes, I also love the choice that they made for the physicality of stringing the bow, where specifically, like, people will try and do it certain ways, and even when Odysseus does it in a certain way, it doesn't work. But the only way it works is when he must have it against his foot on the bottom, and he takes both hands and pulls it down with both hands, and then holds it there once it's there to put it on. It's just the way Damon chose to create that physicality was so unique. I thought it was perfect.
It was so cool, and the bow strum being in the score, not just a sound effect, but actually like a note in the in Ludwig Göransson's score. Incredible part of the film too. The score, just an aside there, but. So there's that test where Penelope finally knows, and that's kind of it. There's another thing where the families of the suitors show up, like what the hell, and Athena stops them from there being any more bloodshed. But the kind of the final note of the story is that final test of Odysseus, that it's really him.
Yep.
Nolan does not do this. He ends on the note of Odysseus reckoning with all this guilt that he's been gradually feeling about what he did to Troy. And the juxtaposition of him violating Zeus's law, which is not called that, it's called xenia in the poem. It's a Greek word. That hospitality is a huge theme, even though the Zeus's law terminology was Nolan's invention. It's a huge theme in the book. So the contrast between like him violating it in such a huge way and then him having to kill all of his house guests at the end of the story, making him realize that like I've done so much harm that I can't just come back and be like, well, I'm king again. And part of this is the realization that downstream of the ways in which he has broken this law, it has perpetuated a cycle of this happening all over the Mediterranean. And we realize that the stuff that his crew has found evidence of these people from the sea, who are the sea peoples, it's a real kind of speculated group of raiders that
there's enough evidence in the record.
Right. There is evidence in the record that this was something that happened that was responsible at least partially for the Bronze Age collapse. We don't really know anything about them or who they were. The film postulates that in the wake of the fall of Troy, other people were like, well, shit, the Zeus's law stuff doesn't matter anyway. And so then it's them that are causing this. Odysseus realizes he's done enough, and he essentially exiles himself to go and fulfill his promise, to go west, to go to this island, this place where he can then give sacrifices and pay homage to all of the men that he was unable to bury in Troy and along the way home, leaving Telemachus to become king because he's now of age.
It's very Return of the King in that way.
It is very Return of the King, yeah, and in the Undying Lands. And that's a really good pull. I like that. Nice. And the final note of the film is he and Penelope are in each other's arms, going towards the sunset like they dreamed of at the beginning. And he has a flashback to, and it's almost this like, okay, this is the restoration. Like, I screwed up, but I'm leaving this in the very capable hands of my son, who is a better person than me. and I am getting my final piece with my wife, and we're going to right the last of the wrongs I have left to right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final shot is him having a flashback on the boat to after the decapitation. He's looking up at the horse on fire. I love it. The horse just falls over 8 feet into the wall of the building next to it. It's not dramatic. It's just... And this image that the instrument of civilization's destruction is itself destructible.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes back to what I said of how this is kind of the Dark Knight Rises to Oppenheimer's Dark Knight, in that it doesn't end with, I believe we did destroy the world. It ends with, I kind of destroyed the world, but that's not permanent.
Mm-hmm.
And there is hope of a cyclicality that civilization will reconstruct itself.
And I think there's a lot of that implied via the Odyssey that is describing what a lot of people are feeling about the world we're living in right now,
Mm-hmm.
where it feels like everyone's getting all, sensationalized, or, whatever the proper terminology would be for that, about the state of the world, about how the West is collapsing, or about how, the world's stability as it is right now is collapsing. And it's like, in a way it is. And we're going to see how far it falls. We might be able to recover the stability that we've had, but maybe we're going to be in another, an information age collapse. We might end up back in a new, restart of civilization, and maybe not necessarily in terms of humanity dying out itself, but the lines on the map that have been drawn have never been permanent. There's always going to be a time where everything gets rewritten. And the question is how long can we create a situation of homeostasis amongst peoples? And right now we're in a position where there's a lot of instability. And a lot of people are worried that the scales are going to tip, things are going to fall, and borders are going to be redrawn. And I think that's inevitable. It's just a matter of when, and it's remembering that even when it does happen, not an if, when it happens, doesn't mean that everything is lost. It means that we're entering a new chapter as a civilization.
Absolutely, and it is inevitable. I think that the consequence of pretty much everyone who's alive right now in America not really knowing any world but the post-World War II American domination over the global sphere is accustomed to a very privileged existence. I'm not saying that pejoratively.
Mm-hmm.
It is a tremendous blessing that we have, for a couple generations now, lived in one of the, as many problems as America has, one of the safest and most stable countries that there's ever been. That isn't the default state of humanity. It was inevitable at some point that there would be another existential threat, I suppose, to civilization.
Mm-hmm.
That was not going to last forever. And in some ways, that was the COVID pandemic.
Yep.
In other ways, it's the distancing of America under this administration from the global, all of the world powers, bar a few, more or less getting along.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to happen eventually. And I think part of it's easy for that to make people go like, oh, that sucks, so I guess we're all screwed. But I think it's important to internalize the message that Nolan's saying here, that, look, the things that we deal with on this scale are not permanent.
No.
The COVID-19 pandemic ended. It was a huge crisis for basically everyone on Earth. Everyone on Earth, whether you even got the virus or not, had some level of negative impact on them.
Mm-hmm.
I know I certainly did. But it ended. And we moved on to the next crisis. And
we are technically in the middle of one right now.
yeah.
But I do think, not to dive too heavily into History Unhinged here, I do, even if for the wrong reasons, I do hope that we are learning the lessons of our past. Because as much as I disagree with a lot of things that have happened recently, I don't necessarily entirely disagree with some levels of isolationism. I don't think trade should ever be isolationized or isolated.
Yeah.
I think global trade is the most fundamental way of peacekeeping in the world.
100%.
I think if everybody relies on each other and we all have to cooperate, it's a lot harder to push the button. That said, influence and military influence are two very different things. I think if we can learn from the fall of Rome anything, it's to not overextend yourself. I think in many ways we have. Whether or not we have the means to support that is up for debate. I think our existing deficit proves probably not. Our debt and deficit, probably not. As much as I think it is important to help out everybody, as important as it is, I think, to be the lending hand for America to be the embodiment of the mindset of Superman, of being the most powerful one in the room and making sure you're using that for good. You know, I think it's important to remember that in order to create that sense of homeostasis, you have to ensure that you're not overplaying your hand. You have to ensure that you are not doing more than you should. And I think the reason I say this is because there are elements that Odysseus does in that regard in this film. I didn't think about that until as I was saying this. But Odysseus is the Oppenheimer of this film, but in ways he's also, if we're going to use a very modern lens, an idealization of what America wants to be. They want to be the one that fate has blessed.
Yeah.
They want to be the one who has the capability to change the world.
You'll get home,
but
but all the others are going to die.
You'll get home, all the others are going to die, and the gods are smiling upon you, and you're also the one who, you're the one who won the war for everybody. Yeah. Everybody else may have taken part in it. Agamemnon may look bulky and scary. He, you know, I mean, I'm thinking of the Soviet Union when I think about Agamemnon in this metaphor.
Oh, that's a good one.
Like, you know, even just cloaked in iron. It's,
yeah.
You know, the Iron Curtain, like all of that fun stuff. But, you know, the idea that through dedication to moral integrity, even amongst your failure, you will succeed is such an inherently American ideal. And the idea that we want America to succeed, is there an intent behind the idea that, hey, maybe part of the success is recognizing the importance of generational baton passing? That maybe the people who have led us to victory, the people who are responsible for our capacities to succeed, may have unintentionally created an environment of destruction, and they are so bathed in it that they must recognize they are not the ones to fix it.
And the fact that you can recognize the integrity of a society based on the level of its compassion to strangers.
Yes, and I think whether intentional or not, there is a metaphor in here.
Oh, I think it's intentional because Nolan, a British filmmaker, took the convention of period films, especially epics, putting people in British accents to sound old-timey, and dispensed with it. And he made even the British actors speak in American accents. I think that makes it feel very close to home for his predominantly American audience, and fits really well in with this analogy we're inferring here.
I agree. I didn't even think about the accents thing, but you're 100% right. It stuck out to me at the very beginning because I was expecting to hear Tom with a British accent and Robert, and they didn't.
Well, when I heard in the trailer Matt Damon speak with an American accent, I was like, oh, he's just having everybody use their default accents. Like, that makes sense. Technically, they should all have Mediterranean accents anyway. That would be a pain. He's just having everybody speak normally. Then I heard Tom Holland speak American. I was like, oh, there's got to be a reason.
Yeah.
Why it's all intentionally American.
And maybe it's because his metaphor, his intent of the story is to recognize there are generations that need to recognize when it's time to let the next fix the problems they've created.
Yeah. I think Agamemnon is an interesting thing to talk about because, first of all, he has so much aura.
Oh, very much so. And
so
the Soviet Union comment was very specific to the like tangential idea line I had. I'm not going to say that I think he is representative of that.
No, I don't think so either. I don't think this is like a Cold War movie.
No.
Very much not. But I do think that is an insightful, like, if we're going to go down the route of comparing the Bronze Age collapse through this film into modern day, I think that makes perfect sense as a analog there.
Yeah, or I mean, you could look at it as any other superpower that, you know, it could be, if you want to say he could be representative of like NATO.
Right, he could
like,
be anyone who does not just need stability for their domain. Agamemnon was the king of Mycenae, but needs to dominate the world. Because that's the thing, to your point of trade being a great way of preventing war, Agamemnon in the Odyssey, his motive is that he wants to dominate the trade route. Troy was located at a very important point and was now Turkey for controlling the flow of ships between the Black and Mediterranean seas. Agamemnon is not content to just have good trade between those places. He wants to control that trade. And so you could map him onto anybody. And trade is very recently, I'm not going to get too political, but trade's very recently become a major sphere of this happening IRL. Mm-hmm. But anyone who needs to control something, not just let it function properly, I think you could map Agamemnon onto.
Yeah.
And it's the design of him is so cool when he's standing outside the gate. Apparently, Matt Damon did not know they were going to be staged out there. So them pulling the gate open was kind of a surprise. I don't know how they managed to make that a surprise, considering that's a big set and that's a lot of people.
Yep.
But him being right there and be like, "Oh, look at me! I'm the face of this, but I'm not going to move. I'm going to make all my men move."
Yeah.
So cool. The armor design was awesome. Anyone who complains about it sucks. The cool thing about what they did with Agamemnon's character, who is not really big in the poem, is that he's kind of, in a sense, the villain of the film.
Yes.
Because he's in... like I already mentioned, the antagonist of the poem is sort of Poseidon in that he's the main obstacle to the protagonist. In this film, everything's kind of thematically rearranged to fit the adaptation, the retelling that Nolan's trying to do. And the main core of the story is not entirely just will he get home, it's does he deserve to go home? Mm. When he goes home, what is he coming home to? What will he do once he returns to his kingdom? In that sense, you need if that's what the real journey is, as much as the physical journey, the antagonist needs to be something that is the obstacle to that. Sinan is the inciting incident in some sense. The antagonist is Agamemnon because he represents what Odysseus committed this sin in favor, in service of. Mm-hmm. He doesn't like Agamemnon. He doesn't trust Agamemnon. He knows Agamemnon's evil. He knows that before he leaves. Like, this is a guy who killed his own kid.
Yep.
Like, this guy's a psychopath. But he goes along with it anyway, intending to prevent harm to his own family in retribution, and then intending to prevent greater suffering in the protracted war by using the horse. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't still wrong. It was just the lesser evil. And Agamemnon represents this, what he feels is inevitable evil, an inevitable destruction. And I think I'm pretty comfortable saying I really liked Strauss in Oppenheimer, but I think he might be my favorite Nolan villain since the Joker.
I like that.
I'm very cautious of recency bias.
Mm-hmm.
But I think based on aesthetic and the role in the story, as not just even less so than the Joker, not a physical antagonist at all, but somebody who is the avatar of all the things that he's running from and all the things that are preventing him from peacefully reintegrating to his old life.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like that a lot.
And I like that he took some dude's spine and put it on his helmet.
Yeah, and put it in gold, yeah.
And last thing about Agamemnon, I can't take credit for this. I saw someone else point it out. The poster with Agamemnon, where I said to you outside the theater, why the hell is the poster Agamemnon? That makes no sense. He's barely in this. Do you remember what the background of the poster is that Agamemnon is put in front of?
I don't recall.
It's Hades. The poster is him
right.
going to hell. The
Right.
poster is Agamemnon going to hell,
Yeah,
which is awesome.
yeah, that is sweet. Yeah, and I like his scene in Hades itself, but I think we should wrap up here. So let's make a last point.
Last point. Yeah, I'm starting to see why Blank Check takes 3.5 hours.
In the future, we can have more. Unfortunately, today we're a little limited on time.
This also does go to why I think some written companion to this is cool, because then a lot of these
feel
can
free to
go
do
out.
that, obviously. But today we're just a little limited by my schedule. But we can.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of stuff. With more time, we could get into the creative liberties and the changes to the myth. I think the thing that I do want to have be my last word, at least, is some of the other ways in which Nolan is rebutting criticism. I already talked about the action, how he upped his game a lot. The other two that I thought of were the criticism that he sort of is emotionless or shies away from emotion.
As a person?
As a filmmaker. Like that his films shy away from emotion. Mm-hmm. I've never really bought into that, because I think that I can kind of understand aesthetically why people say that he's a little detached.
I mean, I immediately think of the scene from Interstellar.
Yeah, again, I don't agree with this.
Yeah.
But I know it's out there and people say it.
Interesting. This is the first I've ever heard of that.
And I think that an even better rebuttal than all of the things I could point to of where his real life sense of the worst thing that could ever happen to me is losing my family bleeds through everything. People think, it's just a trope because he only knows how to write one story. No, he's just genuinely terrified of ever losing his wife. So when he wants to give his protagonist the worst thing he could imagine happening to them, he kills the wife off. That's really all it is.
Yeah.
But a way that the Odyssey is a really good rebuttal to it is the fact that he's very nonlinear editing. His other films that are nonlinear have a rule. In Memento, he has short-term memory loss. I'm going to give everything to you backwards so you suffer from his memory loss. In Interstellar, it's the time dilation. In Dunkirk, he puts text on the screen. There's a week, a day, an hour. There is no rule in this film, but it's super nonlinear. Oh, and the other one, I guess, is Oppenheimer, where it's still separated by objective versus subjective, of black and white versus color. There's no rule in this. When he dips in and out of time is completely driven by the memories and emotions of the characters. Jennifer Lame's editing is all just driven by, what is this person feeling? Oh, he's feeling guilt about Sinan dying. We're going back to Sinan dying. Oh, Sinan is calling to mind what it was like for him to experience Sinan's death. So we're going to go back into that. And then we're going to go into... And so it's all emotion. There's no logic to the editing. It's all just driven by him being attuned to his character's emotions. The third one and the final one was the criticism that he doesn't write women well. And he dropped a banger with his characterization of Penelope.
Yeah, he really did.
Who generally is just sort of portrayed as just a dutiful wife who's waiting and holding out for Odysseus to come back. The fact that he layered in this sort of feminist angle of her bitterness towards the fact that she's been the acting monarch of Ithaca, but has never been able to assume the authority of that role.
Yeah.
And that she has been being hounded by all these men who want that authority, but they don't want the responsibility that she has to be taken on, where she has the responsibility and can't have the authority. And it has to deal with Telemachus being like, I just can't wait to be king.
He is very Simba at the beginning of the movie.
And so her being mad about it and visceral in that performance, really good on Hathaway for doing it that way, but incredible writing of that character. I already mentioned Cersei and how well he wrote her too. So I think I've already thought he has some really good female characters. Murphy in Interstellar, I think, is probably his best one thus far. But I think Penelope just was so well written, and he was so attuned to what her unique experiences as a woman would be like. A male character in that role wouldn't have had the same. So I think, yeah, it didn't come across as spiteful. I really don't want to use it. We keep coming back to Superman. I really don't want to use this. There's a little bit of the scene of the monkeys being a hate mob against Superman in Superman. that felt to me a lot like James Gunn having a chip on his shoulder from the rightful internet campaign to get him blacklisted.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like there's a little spot, like all of you people are monkeys that are being controlled by a billionaire, who I assume is Bob Iger, who fired him. I don't think this felt spiteful on Nolan's part. That he's like, oh, like all you guys that think I suck, well, here's proof I don't.
Yeah, no.
It feels like just him embracing things that he's done a little bit of in the past and bring it into fruition as he has the most resources he's ever had, as he's been as mature as a filmmaker as he's ever been.
Well, it also is just, it's fitting for the film and the character.
And it's fitting for that, right? Like Inception, where the wife and kids are all seen exclusively through just the narrow lens of Cobb's grief. It's not really right to spend a ton of time giving them full personalities, because that's not really the point. We have to move on to the rest of what Inception's about.
Plus, also, the whole idea is that they are his perception of them, not objective versions.
Well, and he hasn't been around his kids. He's been exiled from seeing his kids for forever. So he's the memory is sort of faded. Like he's got this glimpse of his kids. He doesn't have the full. He doesn't have the full sense of who they are because he hasn't known them in so long.
Yeah.
Memento, same thing. Like it's all very right in his POV. He doesn't remember who Carrie-Anne Moss is, so obviously we're not going to see this full picture of who she is as a human being. Mm-hmm. So even though again it wasn't like a hammer, it was more subtle. It was really cool to see him proving people wrong.
Agreed. I think that's a great spot to leave on.
Yeah. See you next time.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by. Hope you enjoyed this. I think the title of this is probably going to end up being Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey and the Death of Our Civilization. I think that would
incredible.
Be... Yeah, I think that's a good title.
Like your... I think it probably belongs as a chapter title, but I love your phrase, the Information Age Collapse.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Christopher Nolan's Odyssey and the Information Age Collapse. Yeah.
Maybe that is a good title.
Yeah,
I
think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, so next one, what are we talking about again? Remind me.
So you were waiting to see how the week went on. It is either DC or Prada because we were waiting on the materials for research for Heat.
Right. Yeah. Since this is going to come out tonight, then I would say, yeah, we can try and see Supergirl sometime this week. Get that for next week. And then we'll see if we get Prada or...
Yeah, the bleed is kind of interesting given the fact that in all 3 episodes so far we have hit the Odyssey, Superman, and Prada.
Yeah, which is very entertaining.
We've successfully made this a 3-part episode about 3 movies.
Yes.
When we could have just compartmentalized them.
Hopefully in the future we'll be more organized.
All right, have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.